Node.js, Express.js. But the cool thing of today is at the end we're going to do a workshop. In about 30 minutes we'll start it, and the point of that is we're going to build a Hello World web app for the first time. Okay. So the contents of today's lecture, for just the first 30 minutes at least, is what we're going to do is a quick recap of what we've done the previous 2 days. Then I'll have an intro to what we can look forward to in this lecture. We'll figure out why we need a web framework when we're building a web app. And then we'll go over the client-server model, what it means to have two different computers communicating whenever you're asking for information and responding with information. We'll figure out what Node and Express are, how they work together, what's nice about them, and maybe some of the things that aren't as favorable, and what we can look forward to in future lectures. So that's our agenda for today. Quick recap. First of all, we've gone over HTML, which is sort of, if you think about a house analogy, right? Think about a house. HTML is like the structure of a house. It's the boards, the planks, the nails. It's what builds a very basic house, right? If you just write HTML, your browser's going to say, okay, I'm just going to throw this in and format it however I think is basic and not distracting. It's not going to look great, but it'll be functional. It'll work. Second, we went over some CSS, right? Which is, in the house analogy, it's like making the house pretty. It's how far apart do we want certain parts of our house, certain rooms. What color should the couches be? What should the ceilings look like? Should the ceilings be white? Things like that. And then we did JavaScript. We learned a little bit about that, which on the client side, what we've done so far, JavaScript is sort of the functionality of our house, right? So it's like maybe the wiring. You say if you flip the switch, I want that switch to be connected to a light. I want a light to turn on whenever I flip the switch. So JavaScript is the programming language, whereas the other two are just markup languages describing some aspect of our app. JavaScript gives us power. And then we also went over jQuery, which is sort of a library for JavaScript. But again, to be clear, JavaScript and jQuery, not the same thing. Okay, so that was the quick recap. Now we're going to do an intro for today's lecture. The general idea of today's lecture is that backends are really cool. Like super cool. Things that you can build with like backends are pretty much everything on the internet. Like anything that you interact with, the idea is that someone built that. And just 3 examples of what you can build now that we're going to, after today's lecture, things you're able to build. Maybe not exactly, but Wikipedia, think about this. Like 30 years ago, the idea that all the world's information, give or take, is at your fingertips, that's a pretty revolutionary idea, right? 100 years ago, it's crazy. Like you'd have to buy a pile of books, and even then, it was like just scratching the surface. And this is like one of the things you can build. And then the second idea is there's 1 billion people like a couple of clicks away from you, right? You want to chat to a seventh of the world, you can do that because of Facebook. And finally, Google. You have any sort of question, right? You just go online. This is most people's homepage, right? And you just type in, what is 6148, right? And you'll probably find an answer. That's these 3 things that it seems very commonplace to us, to me at least, but these are actually really cool. And someone built this. And what we're going to learn today is sort of the fundamentals of how to build things like this. Okay, so specifically for backends, a quick word about how to learn. This part of 6148 is where I personally, when I took the class, started struggling a little bit. It was the part where where I first started having to learn new things. And I had a lot of issues with like not knowing everything, because there's a lot to know. So the main idea is, don't feel like you have to learn everything before you start working. Dive in and just assume that things are working. And if you get stuck, ask questions. But the point is, dive in, start working. It's going to feel like you have no idea what you're doing, possibly. It was for me, and that's okay. Second, I want to do a quick, do we have any chalk? No? Okay. I'm going to lie to you a little bit, but this is sort of how the internet looks, right? We have your computer, some other computer, and we'll call this the server. So this is you, and we'll call this like Facebook server. general idea of the internet is these are devices, they're connected. This is the internet, right? Over the internet. And we'll get to a little bit more of this in a second, but whenever you want to get Facebook's page, you have to say, hey, somewhere, I want, like, to some other machine, I want to get Facebook's page, right? Because Facebook isn't stored on your machine. It's stored somewhere else. So what happens is, you say, hey, Facebook, do you have this page, and we'll get to what that means in a second, but do you have this page? Facebook says, yes, here it is. So that's vast oversimplification of how it works, but that's the general idea that we can use for now. And today, as I said, at the end what we'll have is a functional standalone server or web app. We're going to build one of the most basic / hello world versions of this. Okay, so that was the intro. What we're going to do next is describe what frameworks are and why we need them. So first of all, why frameworks? We've gone over, I think it was the first day, as on Monday, the difference between a static site and a dynamic site. It's sort of a website versus a web app. And we showed that the line is sort of blurry. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive where you're either one or the other. But the idea is that when you add more, as you add more functionality, you run into more issues. You run into issues of complexity, consistency, and security, right? Complexity explodes as you need things like, you need data to be showing up across sessions, right? You go to Facebook multiple times, you want to make sure that your photos are there every time if you've uploaded them once, right? And you don't want people you don't know seeing your photos, so that's security, or one instance of it. So the solution to managing this complexity is an abstraction. So what is an abstraction if you haven't interacted with them before? Complexity is managed by an abstraction. So an abstraction, for an example, is, let's do a quick example. Let's say you have an array of 100 numbers, right? And you want to take the sum of the array. There's multiple ways you can do this, but one, you could just explicitly say, like, 0 index plus first index plus second index plus third index. So like A plus B plus C plus D, etc., 100 times. That's like a terrible way of taking the sum of an array, right? No, people wouldn't do that. You could also do a for loop over that, which is a type of abstraction for iteration, right? Or you could just use what a lot of programs give is the sum function, and you just call sum on that array. It does it for you. So sum is an abstraction, which allows you to do something that otherwise you do over and over again. It takes a lot of effort, and it's very error prone, and it makes it easy and simple. So that's an abstraction. And abstractions manage complexity, as I said. So the point is, frameworks are an abstraction for building web apps. It's going to make everything a lot easier and simpler and more usable on the side of new developers. Okay, so that was frameworks, why we need them. We'll go over examples of frameworks in a little bit. So now the client-server model. It is just a model for interaction. It's this idea that there's two parties. There's the client over here, and then way over here, right, completely separate, there's the server. It's going to be a little bit confusing because what we're building today, both the client and the server, will both be on your personal machine, but don't let that confuse you. The idea is that they are separate things, and you're separating the responsibilities. And in real life, the client asks the server for something, the server responds back, and generally that occurs over the internet. Two computers, yeah, so the client can also be thought of in web development as the requester, because they're making a request, and we'll see this a little bit more later as well. And the server is the responder. They give a response back. These are bolded because they are capitalized because they're important. Visually, what this looks like, instead of me walking back and forth, is multiple clients on the left side requesting to what we'll call a single server on the right and sending a response back. The clients receive HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and assets from the server. The clients, for the sake of this class, we'll call them Chrome browsers operating on behalf of your machine. And on the server side, if you're writing a node, it's going to be written in JavaScript, but node is going to be actually executing your JavaScript. And we'll go over what node is in a little bit as well. But the point is, server-side JavaScript strictly does not equal client-side JavaScript. It's the same language, that's it. They're very different things. The client side is run in the browser, the server side is run in Node. So same language, that's as far as the differences go. As far as the similarities go. Okay, so that was client server. So now we're going to go over what Node and Express are. Let's see how we're doing on time. Not too bad. Okay, so a quick pre-point. Node and Express, we'll call them together a framework for building web apps. But the pre-point is that they're one of many possible frameworks. They're just nice because Node allows you to write JavaScript in the browser and on the server side, so you only have to learn one language. Before Node, people would have to write JavaScript for programming on the browser side, and anything else on the server side, but it would be like Ruby or Python, and you have to learn both languages. This is nice because it's the same. But it's one of many choices, that's the point. So components that we're going to go over in this section. Node.js. Sometimes just said Node, but it can be confusing, so Node.js. We're also going to do Express or Express.js, but those are the same thing. Most people just call it Express. Those are the two big parts that we're going to do. So I want to separate that those are separate from these other smaller things we'll go over, which are Express Generator and NPM. These are smaller portions. Express Generator is a framework, is a package, sorry, and NPM is a package manager, but we'll see what that's on in a second. Okay, so first, Node.js. This is the official ish logo. Cool. Node.js. It's a JavaScript runtime environment. The important part is runtime environment. JavaScript just describes the language that it's written in and the language that it uses. But that's about it. It is a runtime environment. So what does runtime environment mean? Well, you need something to actually run your code, right? Because JavaScript isn't assembly language, right? It can't run directly on your computer. So previously, over on the client side, right over here, we had our browser. And our browser was previously the runtime environment for JavaScript back in the day. JavaScript was written for the browser. So that's what ran JavaScript. But you couldn't actually run JavaScript just on your computer. It had to run through the browser. So what Node does is it provides a runtime environment for JavaScript to run on your computer, so on the server side. So it allows you to write server-side code in JavaScript. That's what it is. It's not a framework, it's a runtime environment. Frameworks are like Express, and we'll see how those interact in a second. It's not JavaScript. Okay? This is important. It's not JavaScript. It's written in JavaScript, and it reads and interacts with JavaScript code. So they're very similar and very connected, but they're different. They're different things. It's also not jQuery, which we've seen before, and it's not Express, which we'll get to in a second. They're different things. Express runs on top of Node.js. But it is asynchronous. So if you don't know what asynchronous means, we'll do a quick example. It's asynchronous versus synchronous. So let's do this over here. Let's say that we have a program that needs to do three things, right? It needs to make three requests to, we'll say, we can say that this is like your disk, your hard disk, and it's like this is program 1, program 2, and program 3, right? And let's say that the three things you need to do is ask how much space each program is using, right, in terms of memory. So things like this actually take time, right? If it's a big program, it can take up to even a couple seconds to figure out how long it takes to figure out how much memory the program's using. So let's say this takes 4 seconds. This question takes 4 seconds. This takes 4 seconds, and this takes 1 second. So the order of things that we have to do is we have to ask P1 for their memory usage, which is 4 seconds, right? And we have to ask P2, 4 seconds. Ask P3, 1 second. Now, traditionally in synchronous programming, the opposite of asynchronous, how long would this normally take, do you think, if you had 4, 4, and 1? Not a trick question. 9 seconds, right. Because you have to do it in order. You have to wait for this to finish, and then you can go here. And then you have to wait for this to finish, and then you can go here and wait. So that's synchronous. But the difference in asynchronous programming is you can ask P1, and then you don't have to wait. You can just say, here's something to run when you finish. So that's the point of callbacks. It'll make a little bit more sense when we start doing it. That's the point of callbacks. You can just say, you know what, you do you, and whenever you're done, here's what to do instead. So asynchronous programming actually lets all 3 of these run at the same time. So then how long would it take instead? Right, okay, cool. So that's the difference. Node is asynchronous, that's what you need to know. If that didn't make sense, that's kind of a bad example, but all right. And the last thing is that's pretty much it. That's all Node is. It's not a web server. It's not a web framework necessarily. It's not really anything else. That's all it is. It's just allowing you to run JavaScript on your personal device, on your computer without a browser. Okay, so that was Node. Second, now we're going to do Express. So Express.js, it is a Node.js framework. The difference between like a framework or a library or things like that, framework just means that it provides a lot of simplification for you. It provides a lot of structure for how you do things. Specifically, Express makes building web apps very straightforward compared to just writing a web app in Node.js and JavaScript in Node.js. It's the de facto server framework if you're going to build a web app using Node. The vast majority of the time you'll be using Express. Whether it's in this class or whether it's in industry, you'll be using Express most of the time. Yeah, so the point of this framework is that it provides abstraction, structure, and usability, as we said. Like we said earlier, right? A framework provides a framework with an abstraction that manages complexity. And we'll see how it helps with that. And the last thing is it uses this concept of middleware. So if you end up reading the documentation for Express and you see this term middleware, it's sort of a term that they made up. I remember reading through the documentation and being like, what is this? I can't find it anywhere. It's just a term that they sort of made up, and we'll see examples of it during the workshop. Okay, a couple of other things. Oh yeah, the other things, let's see how far. Yeah, okay. So, 2 other things, but don't forget, the big points are Node and Express. These are smaller parts of Node and Express. Express Generator is a Node.js executable. Basically, it's just a program that you can run in your terminal, but it's not Express. It's not Express. Okay, it's totally different. It's used with Express, and it's 1 time per project. Basically, it sets up a scaffolding or boilerplate for your Express project. But basically, the first time that you want to start a project, you run Express Generator, and that's the only time you use it. Once per project. And what I mean by boilerplate is, whenever you're starting a web app, there's a little bit of code that you have to write every time, but best practices means that you would write the same code every time. And so boilerplate is just like, oh, I have to write the same like 100-ish lines of code every time, so let's just use Express Generator to make it for us. Okay, and NPM. NPM is the Node Package Manager. It's like the App Store for Node.js. Node, meaning Node.js, right? A package is like an app, sort of, for your project, for your web app. And Manager, because it's another abstraction, right? It manages your packages for you. So, for instance, if you wanted to use this really cool library that you found online in your project, you can use NPM to easily install that, update it, things like that. And we'll actually use NPM in a little bit during the workshop. It is not Node.js. It's not Express. It's separate. It's different. It comes installed with Node.js. Then you will have NPM installed as well. Okay, so visually, what does Express and Node look like? This is up the layers of the stack, right? The very bottom is your computer, and Node sits on top of your device and sort of your file system and your ability to interact with your file system and things like that. And it sits there and it says, all right, I can interpret JavaScript code and run it against my device, right? Run it against your device. And then separate from Node, and on top of Node is Express. And Express is what's going to allow you to easily write web apps in JavaScript using the functionality of Node. But again, right, these are three separate parts of the stack. Okay, cool. So that was the intro to Node and Express section. We'll get to do a hands-on during the workshop, as I said. But now let's take a quick look at the future in our last 2 to 5 minutes. So, all right, so we'll get to build a Hello World web app, but it's going to be very bare bones. It's not going to have a lot of functionality. It's not going to have any security, things like that. But it's still going to be really freaking cool, right? So in the future, personalization. What we're going to see is like some of the code that we've written before in previous days. It's all the same, right? If different people view what you've written, like the HTML page that you've written, it'll look the same to them, right? And today it's going to look the same as well, even though you're going to be hosting it with a server. So in the future, we'll be able to use templating with handlebars, and we'll get a quick taste of that during the workshop as well. But a more in-depth explanation of handlebars and templating in general will be during lecture on Thursday. Second, consistency. Right now, what we'll have, whenever this server over here, right, client asks the server for something, whenever the server goes down, we'll lose any information that we stored, right? Let's say that during the course of the server running, we had some JavaScript that said, I want to create this object. And every time a user logs in or something, I want to add them to this object. So then you have this huge list of all your users on your site. And then that's stored in memory, right? That's stored in volatile memory. And the problem is when your server dies or crashes or someone accidentally unplugs it, you lose the entire user list, which is bad, right? If Facebook all of a sudden lost all of its user lists, that would be really bad. But we'll find ways to mitigate that with an actual database, which provides things like fault tolerance, assurances, consistency, and fallbacks, things like that. But the point is, on Thursday, we'll learn how to interact with the database, and that'll take care of all of those sorts of things. And finally, security. Right now, let's say that if we had the ability to have people upload pictures to our site, or upload personal information, right, such as their birthday or where they live, everybody can access it. And we'll see that in a little bit, but everybody could access it. So we need to learn how to keep user security safe, and we'll use that with Passport.js, which is a package, or even a framework, I'd say, but a package that we'll use with Express, and we'll learn about that on Tuesday. Okay, so that was the future that we can look forward to in the next couple of days, the near future. And that was the lecture, so that was intro to backend, but so get excited because next is the intro to Node and Express